If someone had to design from scratch a creature to represent intelligent life on another planet, it would be hard to improve on the octopus. Its soft, boneless body, its 8 arms covered in suckers, its 3 hearts, and its blue blood seem more like science fiction than an animal related to snails and clams. And yet octopuses are mollusks. They have followed such an extreme evolutionary branch that it is almost hard to recognize that origin. Blue blood is one of the first oddities. Instead of iron-based hemoglobin like mammals, octopuses use hemocyanin, a copper-based protein to transport oxygen. This pigment works better at low temperatures and in oxygen-poor waters, conditions that characterize many deep or cold marine habitats. Hemocyanin gives the blood a dark blue, almost black tone, which reinforces the sense of alternative biology. Then there are the 3 hearts. One is the systemic heart, responsible for pumping blood to the rest of the body. The other 2 are branchial hearts, which push blood through the gills to oxygenate it. When the octopus swims actively, the systemic heart momentarily stops, which makes this type of movement very costly. That is why most of the time they prefer to glide along the bottom or move with short bursts of propulsion rather than swim long distances. The strangeness continues in the nervous system. A common octopus has on the order of 500 million neurons, a figure comparable to that of some small mammals and far higher than that of almost all other invertebrates. But what is really striking is not the number, but the distribution. Only a fraction is concentrated in the central brain. Approximately 70% of the neurons are found in the arms, organized into networks of ganglia that allow each limb to process sensory information and control its own movements with a high degree of autonomy. That is why it is said that the octopus has 9 brains, 1 central and 8 peripheral ones in the arms. Each arm can explore, feel, taste, and manipulate objects almost as if it were a semi-independent entity. The suckers not only adhere with great force, they also have chemical receptors that detect substances dissolved in the water, so the octopus literally tastes everything it touches. This distribution of intelligence throughout the body resembles nothing we know in vertebrates. Body organization is also unusual. Having neither an internal skeleton nor an external shell, the octopus is, for practical purposes, a flexible muscular structure capable of adopting almost any shape. It can stretch like a rope, flatten itself against the bottom, inflate to appear larger, or compress itself to pass through a minimal crack. Under suitable conditions, an adult octopus can pass through an opening barely larger than its eye. This bodily plasticity gives it access to refuges inaccessible to more rigid predators. Despite this apparent fragility, octopuses manipulate their environment with great precision. Their arms can coordinate complex movements without the need for detailed instructions from the central brain. Laboratory experiments show that they can learn to open jars, solve mazes, remember solutions, and adapt when the position of a reward is changed. In aquariums, there are records of octopuses that recognize specific caretakers, that squirt jets of water at lights or cameras that bother them, and even that escape from their tanks to explore other enclosures in search of food. All of this feeds the idea that we are dealing with an alternative intelligence, a nervous system that reached complexity by a different path than that of mammals. While our brain is clearly centralized within the skull, the octopus distributes much of its processing along its arms. While our anatomy is rigid, with defined bones and joints, the octopus is a fluid mass that can reorganize itself on the fly. While we rely on vision as our dominant sense, octopuses combine good vision with an extremely fine chemical sense of touch in each sucker. From an evolutionary point of view, however, everything has a history. Cephalopods appeared in the fossil record more than 400 million years ago. Their ancestors were animals with an external shell, similar to modern nautiluses. Over millions of years, different lineages reduced or lost that shell, which freed the body to acquire new forms of movement, buoyancy, and manipulation. In the octopus lineage, this morphological freedom was combined with the development of an increasingly complex nervous system. probably driven by the need to hunt active prey and escape predators in three-dimensional environments, such as reefs and rocky seabeds. Masters of disguise, the skin that decides in milliseconds. The skin of the octopus is one of the most sophisticated camouflage systems in the animal kingdom. It does not merely change color, it also alters patterns, brightness, and even texture, and it does so on the scale of tenths of a second. To understand why many biologists describe it as a living screen connected to the nervous system, one must take a close look at how this seemingly smooth surface is built. In the upper layer of the skin are chromatophores, small pigment sacs surrounded by radial muscles. Each chromatophore mainly contains yellow, orange, red, or brown tones. At rest, the sac is contracted and barely visible. When the muscles activate, the sac expands and the pigment spreads, as if a dot of ink were being enlarged. Thousands of chromatophores, expanding or contracting simultaneously, generate spots, bands, or patches that cover the entire body. Beneath the chromatophores lie other specialized cells, iridophores and leucophores. Iridophores reflect light structurally, producing metallic, greenish, or bluish shines depending on the angle of incidence. Leucophores, by contrast, act as a white base that scatters light and onto which the rest of the pattern is printed. The combination of pigments and reflectors allows the octopus to reproduce, with remarkable accuracy, the tones of its surroundings: pale sands, dark rocks, green algae, reddish corals. What stands out is the speed of these changes. Timed studies show that some octopuses take around 0.2 seconds to switch from one pattern to another, less time than a human blink. That interval includes the perception of the visual stimulus, the decision of response, and the coordinated activation of thousands of cells in the skin. This is not a simple local reflex, it is a global adjustment of the entire body. The octopus's visual repertoire is organized into camouflage templates. Many individuals can alternate between a few basic patterns: fine mottling for sandy backgrounds, large patches for rocks, high contrast bands for environments with strong shadows. Each pattern combines color distribution and texture. When the animal settles on a rough substrate, it does not only adjust tone, it also erects dermal papillae, small muscular structures that protrude from the skin and give it a granular appearance, like coral or porous stone. On smooth surfaces, by contrast, it retracts those papillae and becomes smooth and flat. It is even more striking that octopuses are, as far as is known, dichromats with a single type of photoreceptor very similar across the retina, lacking the diversity of color cones found in many vertebrates. This has led to theories suggesting that they do not see color as we do, but instead rely on other mechanisms, such as sensitivity to wavelength through chromatic aberrations of the pupil, to infer the spectral properties of the environment. Whatever the exact mechanism, the fact remains that they achieve remarkable color matching with their background despite this apparent visual limitation. Beyond passive camouflage, octopuses use their appearance-changing abilities to communicate and deceive. In the presence of predators, some adopt warning patterns with very strong contrasts to appear less edible or more dangerous. Others use their bodies as imitation. Species such as the so-called mimic octopus can adopt postures and colors reminiscent of lionfish, sea snakes, or venomous flatfish, depending on the type of threat. They do not change only color. They reorganize their silhouette, distribute their arms, and modify the shape of the mantle. In social interactions, although octopuses are not highly gregarious animals, they also display bodily signals. Abrupt changes to dark tones can indicate aggression or defense. Pulsating patterns of color traveling across the body seem to correlate with states of excitement or stress. In mating contexts, some males display specific patterns as they approach the female, alternating between total camouflage and visible color patches that can only be seen from certain angles. All of this implies a very close integration between vision, neural processing, and muscular control of the skin. Environmental information reaches the eyes. The central nervous system interprets it. Commands are distributed to networks of neurons that control chromatophores, iridophores, leucophores, and papillae. But it does not end there. There are indications that certain responses may be modulated locally, so that parts of the body adjust their pattern without an explicit order for each cell from the main brain. The skin of the octopus, in practice, behaves as a dynamic extension of its nervous system. It is not merely a covering, it is both a sensory and motor organ, capable of reacting at a level of detail that exceeds what could be coordinated solely from a single control center. An observer sees the animal disappear against a rocky background and tends to think of a visual trick. In reality, what occurs is a massive redistribution of muscular and neural activity, modulated in real time by perception of the environment. For a human brain accustomed to separating skin, eye, and brain as clearly differentiated structures, this integrated system is disconcerting. It contributes to the sensation that the octopus operates according to different rules, almost as if it were a form of bioengineering alien to vertebrate patterns. But what seems like strange design is once again the result of millions of years of natural selection in complex three-dimensional environments where camouflage is the difference between living and being eaten. 9 brains, when arms think too. To understand why people speak of distributed intelligence in octopuses, one has to start with the raw fact. Their nervous system has around 500 million neurons, but only part of them are concentrated in the central brain. The rest are spread throughout the body, with a particularly high density in the arms. Each of the 8 arms contains networks of ganglia that process sensory information, coordinate complex movements, and can execute actions without detailed supervision from the main brain. This is why the idea became popular that the octopus has 9 brains, 1 central brain located around the esophagus, and 1 functional brain in each arm. They are not independent brains in the human sense, but they are local control centers capable of making limited decisions. The brain sets general goals, such as exploring, capturing, and bringing food closer, while the arms take care of the details, which trajectory to follow, how much force to apply, which suckers to use, and how to coordinate with the others. Neurophysiological experiments show that an isolated arm can continue to respond to tactile stimuli in an organized way. It contracts, grasps, and explores. These are not random movements, but motor patterns pre-configured in the arm's own neural tissue. In the intact animal, these modules are integrated under the supervision of the central brain, but they retain a margin of autonomy. Exploration of the environment illustrates this logic well. When an octopus approaches an unfamiliar surface, it does not extend a single arm following a precise order from the brain for every millimeter traveled. It usually deploys several limbs that probe, test, and manipulate at the same time. The suckers collect mechanical and chemical information, texture, shape, presence of edible or toxic substances. Part of this processing is resolved within the arm itself, which decides whether to keep advancing, go around an obstacle, or retract. The central brain receives a summary of what is happening, not the details of every contact. This organization resembles a distributed network more than a rigid hierarchy. Instead of a conductor controlling every muscle, there are local nodes with some decision-making capacity connected to a central node that sets goals and resolves conflicts. If 2 arms want to grasp the same object, the brain coordinates. But if one arm detects something dangerous, it can withdraw before consulting anyone. This local speed is an obvious advantage in an environment full of predators. Learning is also affected by this architecture. Octopuses are capable of acquiring new behaviors through trial and error, opening jars, sliding lids, operating latches. At the neuronal level, this implies that distributed motor patterns are adjusted based on the reward obtained. The central brain can reinforce certain movement sequences and suppress others, while the circuits in the arms adjust the fine details of manipulation. It is a type of learning that is not confined to a single site. It is shared between the center and the bodily periphery. Another consequence is multitasking ability. An octopus can use some arms to anchor its body in a crevice, others to explore an object, and yet another to bring food to its mouth, all in a coordinated manner. From the outside, it looks like a chaos of tentacles. In reality, each arm follows specific programs and exchanges enough information to avoid tangles and collisions. Absolute centralization would make this control too slow. Decentralization allows fast, parallel responses. Even arm regeneration fits into this model. When an octopus loses a limb, over time it can regenerate it with its full functional complexity, including the neuronal network of the new arm. It does not merely rebuild muscle and skin, it reconstructs a complete cognitive module, ready to be integrated into the general network. That an animal can reconstruct part of its own peripheral neuronal infrastructure and reinsert it into the functional system sounds, again, more like engineering design than simple healing. This distributed perspective challenges our intuitions about what it means to think. In the human case, thought is almost always associated with the inside of the skull. In the octopus, a significant part of what we would call calculation occurs in the body itself. Its arms are not mere tools controlled by a central operator. They actively participate in motor and sensory decision-making. It is reasonable to say that the octopus thinks with its arms, in the sense that they evaluate, select, and execute actions semi-independently. From the point of view of cognitive science, this makes it a perfect model for studying the idea of embodied mind. The notion that cognition is not localized in a single organ, but emerges from the continuous interaction between brain, body, and environment. In the octopus, that interaction is so extreme that our usual distinction between central nervous system and periphery loses clarity. All this has developed without anything resembling a backbone, a skeleton, or a jointed hand. Evolution has explored a completely different path to solve similar problems. How to perceive the environment, how to manipulate it, how to anticipate consequences. While vertebrates relied on centralization and rigid structures, this mollusk opted for a flexible, bodily expanded network. Tools, foresight, and the story of the coconut octopus. For a long time, it was thought that sophisticated tool use was an almost exclusive trait of primates, some marine mammals, and a few birds. That an invertebrate could do something similar seemed unlikely. This idea was shattered in 2009 when a team of researchers documented in Indonesia a small octopus that collected, transported, and assembled coconut halves to use them as a portable shelter. The protagonist was Octopus marginatus, now popularly known as the coconut octopus. The observed behavior had several well-defined steps. First, the animal located empty coconut halves on the sea floor, remnants of fruits thrown into the sea by humans and carried to sandy bottoms. Then it positioned itself over one of the pieces, cleaned it of sediment with jets of water, and turned it until it was in the correct orientation. Sometimes it looked for a second compatible half and brought it closer. Finally, it picked up one or two shells under its body and began to move along the bottom as if walking on stilts, arms extended downward, shells held by the suckers, body suspended above. While moving this way, the octopus is more exposed than if it stuck to the substrate or hid in a crevice. Researchers interpreted this as an investment. The animal accepts an immediate risk in exchange for a future benefit, having a portable shelter when needed. The key to considering it tool use is not just that it hides inside something, but that it collects, transports, and stores these materials for later use, outside the context in which they were found. This nuance is important. Many animals use objects in their environment immediately. A fish that enters a crevice, a hermit crab that occupies an available shell. The coconut octopus goes further. It moves coconut halves tens of meters across the seafloor before using them, and assembles them into an almost closed sphere around its body. Later observations showed that it can also use mollusk shells and other human debris, incorporating them into the same repertoire of mobile shelters. Cognitively, this behavior involves several linked capacities. First, recognition of the shape and properties of objects. The octopus identifies that these coconut halves are hollow, sturdy, and fit together. Second, motor planning. It coordinates 8 arms and hundreds of suckers to place, hold, and transport pieces that exceed its size. Third, temporal foresight. It tolerates an immediate cost to obtain a delayed benefit, something that, in other species, is usually associated with some degree of future representation. The story of the coconut octopus is not an isolated case of exotic rarity within a simple group. Other octopuses have been seen accumulating stones and shells to reinforce the entrance of their burrows, arranging them as defensive walls. In captivity, individuals of various species learn to open jars, move sliding lids, operate levers, or direct jets of water at light switches or equipment that bother them. In all these scenarios, they combine tactile and chemical exploration with the ability to remember which actions produce which effects. From an evolutionary perspective, these behaviors have deep roots. Cephalopods are active predators that hunt shrimp, crabs, and fish in complex three-dimensional environments such as rocky bottoms and reefs. They cannot rely on a rigid shell like many other mollusks. Their defense is to move quickly, hide, and manipulate the environment. This selective pressure favors nervous systems capable of integrating visual, tactile, and chemical information, and extremely flexible bodies that can exploit improvised shelters and minimal interstices. The evolution of an intelligent, soft body also drives unconventional motor control solutions. Coordinating 8 arms with countless degrees of freedom is very different from moving 4 articulated limbs. Models suggest that in these animals, many control tasks are solved locally in the arms, while the central brain handles general goals and integrates information about the context. In this framework, tool use does not appear as a magical leap, but as a natural extension of pre-existing capacities: fine tactile exploration, object memory, trial and error learning, planning of complex movements. The difference with other invertebrates is one of degree, not of presence or absence of intelligence. What is surprising is how much that degree approaches behaviors we previously considered typically mammalian or even human. The accumulation of evidence has led to a reconsideration of the boundary between cognitively advanced vertebrates and the rest of the animal kingdom. The octopus occupies an uncomfortable position in that classification. Its lineage separated from ours hundreds of millions of years ago, yet it has reached functional solutions comparable to those of animals with much larger brains and completely different bodies. It is a clear example of convergent evolution in terms of function, but divergent in terms of structure. This functional convergence fuels the imagination of alien intelligence. Not because there is real evidence that octopuses come from another planet, but because their biology shows how, starting from very different materials and a radically different body architecture, natural selection can produce systems with astonishing capacities for learning, manipulation, and anticipation. To imagine an extraterrestrial mind, many scientists prefer to first study terrestrial minds that already deviate from the known, and the octopus is the best available candidate. Impossible. Alliances. Octopuses and fish hunting together. Although most octopuses are solitary hunters, in recent years, scenes that seem straight out of a science fiction movie have been documented. Mixed groups of fish and octopuses organizing joint hunts over reefs and rocky bottoms. In the Red Sea and other tropical areas, divers and biologists have filmed daytime octopuses patrolling alongside various predatory fish, such as groupers, croakers, or goatfish, forming true interspecies hunting teams. The basic functioning of these alliances relies on complementarity. Fish have an advantage in fast open water chases and exploring water columns. The octopus, in contrast, dominates the reef's nooks, substrate holes, and cracks where prey hide. During recorded hunts, fish often act as scouts. They survey the environment, detect suspicious movements, and visually mark a spot on the bottom, changing direction or adopting characteristic postures. The octopus responds to these signals by approaching the indicated location and using its arms to explore cavities and flush out hidden prey. When prey attempts to escape into open water, the fish are well positioned to intercept it. If, on the other hand, it remains hidden, the octopus can insert its arms into the crevice, feel the interior with its suckers, and capture it directly. In this way, both types of predators increase their chances of success compared to hunting alone. Cooperation is neither constant nor obligatory. It forms and dissolves depending on prey density, habitat structure, and the availability of suitable partners, suggesting flexible behavior rather than a rigid program. A striking aspect is the assignment of roles within these associations. In some studies, it has been observed that certain fish species tend to occupy relatively stable positions. Some move ahead to explore, others stay close to the octopus waiting for the chance to capture fleeing prey, and others patrol the periphery of the group. The octopus, in turn, seems to act as a catalyst of action when it decides to descend to the bottom and deploy its arms over a specific area. This functional structure resembles cooperative hunting in social vertebrates, but here it occurs between species that, in principle, do not have long-term social bonds. Cooperation does not eliminate conflict. In fact, one of the findings that has drawn the most public attention is the observation of octopuses striking their fish partners during these hunts. In video recordings analyzed by ethologists, episodes are described in which an octopus explosively thrusts an arm at a specific fish, displacing it from the group or moving it away from the area where it might catch prey. These punches are not random. They are usually aimed at fish that have tried to steal a catch or have positioned themselves advantageously without contributing to the hunt. Researchers interpret these strikes as a form of partner control, a mechanism through which the octopus punishes opportunistic companions, redistributes access to hunting benefits, and in some cases, breaks collaboration with unreliable individuals. Something similar has been described in social vertebrates that punish group members who do not cooperate. Here, however, these are interactions between different species, coordinated in real time, without complex social structures or stable hierarchies. This type of cooperative hunting raises several cognitive questions. To truly benefit from the alliance, the octopus must recognize potential partners, distinguish between fish that contribute something and fish that only try to take advantage, and adjust its behavior accordingly. It must integrate rapid visual cues such as changes in direction, head movements, and movement patterns with its own search scheme. In addition, it needs some degree of short-term memory to associate an individual's actions with concrete outcomes, at least for the duration of the hunt. At the nervous system level, the octopus's distributed architecture could facilitate this coordination. While the central brain evaluates the group's disposition and decides when to descend to the bottom, extend its arms, or change zones, the arm ganglia manage fine details, which crevice to explore, how to circle a rock, how to adjust the skin pattern to remain relatively camouflaged while stalking. This integrated multitasking allows simultaneous responses to signals from fish, prey, and the physical environment, something that would not fit well with fully centralized control. What is remarkable is that all this complexity occurs in a lineage that does not exhibit the classic features associated with persistent sociability. There are no herds, no stable schools, no lasting family groups. Most of the octopus's life cycle is spent alone with brief encounters for reproduction. Even so, in certain ecological contexts, it is capable of entering cooperative modes, implicitly negotiating with other species and managing occasional conflicts within these temporary alliances. It is this set of traits that has led many popularizers to describe the octopus as the closest thing to an alien on Earth. Some marginal hypotheses have gone further, suggesting that certain peculiarities of its genes or nervous system might support directed panspermia, that is, an extraterrestrial origin for part of its biology. However, the available evidence does not support this idea. The octopus genome, although complex and full of surprising expansions of gene families, fits within what is expected in mollusk evolution and shows continuity with other cephalopods. The scientific consensus is clear. Octopuses are a product of terrestrial evolution, not cosmic seeding. What makes them fascinating is not that they come from another planet, but that starting from a very ancient common ancestor with other mollusks, their line has explored an extreme combination of bodily plasticity, sensory sophistication, and distributed nervous organization. Watching them disappear in 0.2 seconds over a rocky bottom, walk like on stilts carrying coconuts, or coordinate strikes and ambushes alongside fish. What we see is not a visitor from space, but a demonstration of how far life's diversity can go on a single planet when allowed to experiment for hundreds of millions of years.